Hi guys, I'm Drew. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I've started this channel to show the kitting out of a stock standard 2019 SR5 Hilux and upgrading it to be an off-road tourer. Also going to show some of the adventures that we go in this car off-road throughout the top end of Australia. The reason I started this channel, I had a bit of a look around online when I was trying to research about building a good off-road tourer, and I couldn't find anything that met my needs, that would give me all of the details and the intricacies. There's a lot of people who sort of discuss in part about building their vehicles up, but nothing from start to finish, which is why I've started up this channel. So why the 2019 Hilux? Looked at a range of vehicles. Probably the most preferred was the Toyota 200 series. Brilliant vehicles, fantastic off-road, nothing can beat them. But unfortunately they're a bit cost prohibitive. We're looking at one in the second-hand region, which is about $80,000. Then by the time you add on all of your equipment to it, you're looking at a vehicle worth $100,000 plus. So it wasn't really practical for our purposes and probably a bit too much for what we wanted. Had a look at a number of the dual cab utes, the Toyota Hilux, the Ford Ranger, the Mazda BT50, the Holden Colorado, the Volkswagen Amarok. We also looked at the Prado. Prado we ruled out fairly early on because it just didn't have the storage capacity that we wanted. You know, 7 seats, small area in the back, not really ideal for our purposes. So we pretty much settled on a dual cab ute. The two top selling dual cab utes last month were the Toyota Hilux, which sold 3,700 units. As well as the Ford Ranger, which sold about 3,500 units. So obviously we're onto a good things with these cars. They're the most popular in Australia and for good reason. Probably a lot to do with their versatility, and you can use them obviously for work and play and your general commuting as well. When we were looking around, we had it narrowed down basically between the Hilux and the Ford Ranger. The reason ultimately that we went with the Hilux, number of reasons. They are a little bit cheaper, depending on the spec level that you get, but a little bit cheaper. There was a deal on with the Hiluxes at the time, and the Ford we were looking at getting has the new 2-litre bi-turbo engine. It's a bit untested. They haven't been around for all that long, so I wanted to make sure that we got a vehicle that had an engine that had been around for a little while, and we knew all the flaws and kinks had been sorted out. Having said that, the Toyota Hilux has the 2.8 common rail turbo diesel engine, producing about 130 kilowatts. It's been around since, or was released in 2015. There have been some diesel particulate issues, which if you go online you can read all about. The Toyota's put in a special diesel particulate burner to get rid of these issues. They've installed a separate switch, but on my daily commute I get up to 100 kilometers an hour just traveling to work, so I don't foresee that to be a huge issue. Other than that, there hasn't been a real lot of issues with these cars. Some people talk about, you know, that Toyota's Hiluxes are starting to lose some of their legendary off-road reliability, and that they're built tough, but as far as I'm concerned, they're still a great buy. At the time we bought the vehicle, as I discussed, they were quite a bit cheaper than the Ford. At the time, Toyota had free on-road costs as well as $1,000 worth of free accessories. And in addition to that, they've got their cap service, which makes life a lot easier. You don't have to worry about what you're going to spend every time you go in and take it for a service. So the Toyota Hilux at present is stock standard, apart from 2 modifications. The first is the window tinting, which we got done basically straight after we bought the vehicle. The window tinting, I probably wouldn't get it done again. The Toyota Hilux actually comes with tinted glass, so once you put the tint on the vehicle, it doesn't actually make that much difference if you keep it as a legal tint. The windows are almost as dark basically as what they can be legally. So unless you want to go into an illegal tint, I probably wouldn't worry about it. The only other modification we've had are the tyres. These vehicles come with highway tyres, as most new cars do, because that's where people do the vast majority of their driving. Swap them out for a set of all-terrain Bridgestone Duelers. Haven't used these tyres before in the past, but by all accounts they get good reviews and are a good off-road tyre, and I'll certainly report back as to how they're wearing. One of the things I considered was changing out the rims. These come with a standard with an 18-inch rim, which is a little bit problematic because you don't have a huge sidewall, which makes lowering your tyres and off-road driving a little bit more difficult. That's why you find a lot of vehicles will have 15 or 16-inch rims when they're used for off-road purposes. It was a bit cost prohibitive to buy all new rims as well, so I'm going to see how these go. That's something I can always change in the future when we change our tyres. It's a bit difficult having 18-inch rims because you limit your choice with your light truck construction tyres. If you want a proper off-road vehicle, you do want that light truck construction because it means that the sidewalls are a bit stronger and they're going to be harder to penetrate with sticks, debris and other items. So if you're going to get off-road tyres, always look for light truck. As I said, they were a bit limited, but Bridgestone's one of the companies that do make a light truck in 18s. So we'll see how they go. This is one of the reasons the Toyota Hilux is the best-selling car in Australia at the moment, because of its versatility and load carrying capacity. You can carry up to about 925 kilos in the rear of a Hilux. They call most of these cars 1-tonners, but invariably they're usually just under 1 tonne. Our intention is to equip this with canopy, drawers, electrical system, possibly a water tank as well, so it's all set up for off-road touring. It's leaf sprung, which all or the vast majority of dual cab utes are, which is to help deal with the weight in the back. You just can't carry huge amounts of weight when you have coil spring suspension. It's really only possible with leaf sprung. That does affect the ride somewhat. Having said that, the ride within the Ford Ranger was slightly better than the Toyota Hilux, but for the reasons I mentioned, ultimately we decided on the Hilux. It is a little jittery over rough roads, but hopefully once we put a bit of weight in the back, that'll sort that out and it'll make it a lot smoother. One of the accessories we chose when we were taking delivery of the vehicle was what they call the dust defender kit. That's this black strip around the rear of the tub. What it does is it's supposed to keep the dust out. When we have the canopy on, which will have an inlet valve, hopefully that'll pressurise the rear tub, put some silicone in the bank to close up the drainage holes, and then with the pressurisation in addition to the dust defender, hopefully that keeps a lot of the dust out. I had a chat to the salesman who sold us this vehicle. He had recently purchased a Hilux as well. He got the dust defender with a soft tonneau cover, and he said it didn't make an ounce of difference. But hopefully with the canopy being pressurised, it'll make a fair bit of difference when we take it off-road to keep some of that dust out. Because of the way in which these tubs are constructed, you're never going to be able to get them 100% airtight. It's just not possible. But if we can minimise that dust ingress as much as possible, that's what we're aiming for. So what's it like inside the Toyota Hilux? It's a nice car, it's well finished. There's a number of variants that you can get with the SR5. You can get the Workmate, or sorry, with the Hilux, you can get the Workmate, the SR, the SR5, and then the Rogue. They also have 2 off-road models, the Rugged and the Rugged X. They all have slightly different trim levels. Because this is the SR5, you get the carpets with it, climate control and a few other bits and pieces. We did look closely at the Rugged and Rugged X, which come with a fair bit of off-road kit. It's actually pretty good value. The kit that you get with it comes with front and rear bars, recovery points, side steps, proper rock rail side steps, a few other bits and pieces, cargo tub liner, leather interior. But when we looked at it, you're really locked into having the exact setup that they've got, and there's not really a lot of room for modification. That's not what we wanted out of our vehicle, which is why we ended up choosing the SR5 with the intention for us to do all of the work that we want to do and customise it in the way that we want it. So inside the Hilux, it's quite a nice place to be. One of the things I don't like is the entertainment system. As you can see, there is no knobs, it's all just push button. That becomes really annoying when you're going to change the volume. I'm not sure why they did away with a volume knob, but if I've got one piece of advice for Toyota or any other car manufacturer, just bring it back. The worst thing you can have in a car is pushing those finicky little buttons trying to get the volume up. It's alleviated somewhat by the steering wheel, which has the controls for the audio on that by push button, which is a little bit better, but still it's I don't know why you just can't have a knob. It's well constructed inside. as you would expect from Toyota. There's no squeaks and rattles. It's a nice place to be. The plastic looks nice. One of the things which is a bit weird is on the dash there is a fake stitching put into the dash. I'm not sure why you would do that as a design effect. If it was a fabric or something along the lines of that, absolutely, but for whatever reason they've put a fake stitching line on the dash as a special little feature for you, which I don't think looks all that great. This vehicle comes with what Toyota calls Toyota Safety Sense, which is basically means the vehicle is equipped with a radar or a sensor at the front of the car, and that allows you the technology for the radar cruise control, which means the vehicle will keep a set distance from the car, speeding up and slowing down from the car in front of you. It has autonomous emergency braking, which will apply the brakes in an emergency situation to prevent a collision, and it's also got lane departure assist, and the intention behind that is to keep you within the lane if the car detects that you're veering outside. Manufacturers deal with this in different ways. Some just have an automated warning that tells you when you're leaving your lane. Some of the Hyundais have active steering, so the steering actually fights against you as you're driving and will push you back into the lane. Toyota's gone with a different way in dealing with this problem. It actually plies the brakes to veer the vehicle back into the lane, so either the left or the right side to veer the vehicle back in. I find the system to be unnecessary intervention. I don't like it, and it can take you by surprise. If you're on a residential street and you pull out to pass a parked car and you cross over the lane without indicating, then Toyota Safety Sense will kick in and it'll veer you back into your lane. But when it does it unsuspectingly, it kind of makes you feel like you're going to crash into the car. I'm sure that Toyota, there'd be systems in place to prevent that happening, but I find it unnecessary intervention, and I do what everyone should do with those systems and turn them firmly off. So a couple of the accessories that we got with Toyota, we got the seat covers, which are a canvas seat cover for both front and rear. We're going to have to be getting in and out of the vehicle, having stuff dragged along the back seat. We wanted to make sure the seats were protected. We've also got the floor mats, which are not a bad product. They're the Toyota Genuine. They probably don't cover as much of the floor as I'd like. They are a little bit thin, but we'll see how they hold up. Obviously going to have muddy shoes getting in and out of the car. Want to make sure the carpet's protected. One of the things that I wasn't really impressed with was the center console of the Hilux. The lid on it is made out of a faux leather, and it feels quite flimsy and cheap. So I went onto eBay and bought a neoprene cover for it, which is fitted. It seems like a reasonable product, and I would highly recommend that you get one for your Hilux if that's the vehicle that you choose to buy. Plenty of room in the front of the vehicle. I'm 6'3" and I fit in here fine. I'll get in the back shortly and show you the room in there and a couple of the issues that they have back there when it comes to taller people and headroom. So in the rear of the Hilux, you can see the front seat is actually fairly far back at the moment, and I still have enough room for me to sit back here for short periods of time comfortably. If it was a longer trip, you'd definitely want the seat forward a little bit, which wouldn't compromise in the front passenger space by too much. You could comfortably fit 2 adults back here. 3 would probably be a bit of a stretch. There's not a lot of room for a middle passenger. Probably the worst design feature in the rear of the Hilux is the grab handle, which is right in line with where your head sits, especially for taller people. So when you're off-road, bouncing around, going from side to side, there's a real risk that you will hit your head on this grab handle. It's a design flaw Toyota must know about, and they really should do something to fix it up. The only other thing in the rear here worth mentioning is probably the rear air vents. There's dual air vents back here for the passengers, which is good in Northern Australia where it gets rather hot. Other than that, it's not a bad place to be. There's not really much worth mentioning. Grab handles both here and on the roof. Just unfortunate that the one on the roof is likely to knock you unconscious. So that's an overview of the Toyota Hilux SR5. What I'll do now is I'll take it out and show you what it drives like. So driving the SR5 Hilux, there's probably 2 things that you notice immediately when you start driving this vehicle. One is that, as I've already discussed, the rear end with the leaf sprung is really quite jittery. If you go over any bumps or any sort of unevenness in the road, you do feel it quite strongly coming from the rear of the vehicle. I think it would be a difficult thing to live with daily if you didn't either change the suspension a little bit or put some weight in the back to calm it down. The second thing you'd notice is that the vehicle isn't hugely overpowered. It does only have 130 kilowatts with 450 newton meters of torque. I've upgraded from a Land Rover Defender which had about 100 kilowatts, so I don't really mind. I think the extra power you get in this vehicle is quite sufficient. But when you're looking at class, it's sort of bottom of class for power. If you compare this vehicle to the Ford Ranger, for example, the new 2-litre bi-turbo, that has 157 kilowatts. If you compare it to the Volkswagen Amarok, that has 165 kilowatts. There's also a sports version of the Amarok which has 190 kilowatts. The Amarok obviously runs a V6, which is always going to have the capacity for more power, but as far as in its class, the Hilux, when it comes to power, is right down the bottom. The Hilux has an excellent seating position. It's very easy to get comfortable on the seat. You've got a good view of the road and all throughout the cabin. One of the things you notice with the Hilux is it's still hydraulically assisted steering, which I actually prefer. Some of the other vehicles are starting to go towards electronic steering, such as the Ford Ranger. You do lose some of that feel for the road, that feedback through the steering when you have electric steering, whereas the hydraulic steering still gives you good feedback. It is a bit firmer, but you do notice a difference when you're driving. That obviously has significant benefits off-road when you need that feedback whilst navigating terrain and tracks. In deciding between the Hilux and the other dual cab utes that were on the market, we did take a number of utes for a test drive. We didn't test drive the Mitsubishi Triton nor the Isuzu D-Max, but all the others on the market we test drove, and we quite liked a number of them. The Ford Ranger, as I've already discussed, is a very good vehicle. It's more car-like to drive. Got a very nice interior. There's nothing wrong with the interior of the Hilux. As I've mentioned, the infotainment system obviously has a few issues. The Volkswagen Amarok was also very nice to drive, has a really nice interior. The V6 obviously gives it plenty of power. It was high up on the list for us, but just some concerns about reliability issues and the lack of aftermarket accessories. They're not as plentiful as they are for Toyotas, which are market leaders, or even the Rangers, which there's plenty of aftermarket accessories and more coming on the market all the time. When testing the Holden Colorado and the Mazda BT50, both of them are quite agricultural inside. They're a fairly basic sort of setup. The BT50 is based on the old lineage of the Ford Ranger. They share the same 3.2 litre engine, which you can still get in the Ford Ranger. They're not a bad vehicle. They're quite a bit cheaper, but you do notice that in the fit and finish of the vehicles. Not to mention the way that Holden's currently going in Australia. They probably cease to exist in the next few years because people just aren't buying their products. So then if you buy a new Holden, you've obviously got concerns about their ongoing ability to service and provide maintenance for the vehicles. So on the road, Hiluxes are two-wheel drive. There's a low transfer case which also allows for four-wheel drive obviously, and then low range as well. In addition to that, the Hilux is equipped with a rear locking diff, downhill ascent control and hill start assist, which is all handy when you're off-road. From a safety perspective, the Hilux is 5-star ANCAP. It's the highest rating you can get in Australia at the moment. Has 7 airbags, including front and rear curtain. That was one of the things we didn't like about the Amarok. That doesn't have rear curtain airbags, so it's a little bit behind in class, although it retains its 5-star rating from when it was initially tested. If the Amarok was retested today, it would lose its 5-star rating. The Hilux has stability, brake and traction control, which is all fairly standard on new vehicles these days. You don't find too many vehicles without those systems. Has a reversing camera. Unfortunately, it doesn't have front or rear sensors, which are standard now in a lot of cars, but unfortunately with utes, they tend to be lower on features. They tend to be the last of the lineup when the technology trickles down. So I imagine they'll become standard at some stage. They are an aftermarket accessory, you just have to pay more for front or rear sensors. The Hilux has a good towing capacity, 750 kilograms unbraked and 3,200 kilograms braked. Although, like most of the towing capacities, I don't think you'd want to tow 3,200 kilos in this car for all that long. I think the engine would probably struggle a little bit, but it's nice to know that you've got that capacity if you need it. The gearbox in this vehicle is a 6-speed automatic. It's a nice unit, handles changes well. It's very smooth. There's a couple of different modes you can select for it. You can select economy mode or power mode. It does make a noticeable difference in shifting when you do switch between the two modes. And of course it does affect your fuel consumption. Fuel consumption for the Hilux is, I think the sticker fuel consumption is about 8.7 litres per 100 kilometres. Of course you never get anything like that. Driving around urban rural areas, I get somewhere in the vicinity of about 10 litres per 100 kilometres. Which is about average for this sort of class of vehicle with this amount of weight. It might settle down a bit more once the engine's been a bit more worn in. I've only done 1,000 kilometres at this stage, but we'll see how that progresses and see if there's any change as the engine settles in a bit more. When we were buying the Hilux, there was a number of demo vehicles for sale, but it was right at the time Toyota was introducing their Safety Sense package, and we wanted to make sure that we got the Safety Sense package on the Hilux, which weren't available on the demo vehicles. It was only $1,000 more than the base price without the Safety Sense package, so it was well worth getting. One of the best features of the Toyota Safety Sense package is the radar cruise control, which makes a huge difference when traveling in rural areas. Coming from a Land Rover Defender with no cruise control, coming into a car with radar cruise control is a bit of a luxury, and it makes a huge difference on long road trips. The Toyota radar cruise control is a bit different from some of the other cars I've driven. It actually stops working under 20 kilometers an hour and it'll give you an audible notification and just basically turns off, whereas in vehicles such as Volkswagen, it'll actually bring the entire vehicle to a stop, and then you can push the accelerator, the vehicle will take off again and go back up to speed. So a slightly different way of doing it, but you do have to make sure that you're paying attention. You should always be doing that when you're driving anyway, but because the system does disengage, if you weren't paying attention, it could catch you off guard. Well, I hope you enjoyed my review of the Toyota SR5 Hilux. If you did, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future updates to turn this stock standard Hilux into an off-road tourer. We'll also be showing you some of the adventures that we take this vehicle on across the top end of Australia. So make sure you subscribe to stay tuned. Thanks for watching.